Hi everyone, it's Tim Guy here to talk about my research paper I wrote and just a little bit of information about what I looked into and kind of some applications that we can use whenever we do online teaching. So what I looked into was gender differences in online education. Specifically, I looked into a flipped classroom research. My school has iPads for every student, so that's sort of something that's more applicable to my personal situation. So that's something I was interested in. Basically, what this lesson looked at was the researchers were from Taiwan, and they looked into how gender affected student perceptions and learning outcomes in a flipped classroom. So basically, what they went ahead and did was they said, hey, when we look at these students who are in a flipped classroom, how is what they're perceiving about the lesson and how they're doing in these classrooms, how is that affected by whether they're a male or female? Okay, so basically, do males and females feel differently about flipped classrooms, and do one or the other perform better in a flipped classroom? And the reason why this is so important is that flipped classrooms are a fairly new thing, and they're kind of the hot, trendy thing in schools right now. Is that we are looking at what are different ways to reach student needs and having sort of the lesson part be at home while the more in practice part be in the classroom is kind of a new way to think about how we can reach different students. And we need sort of this research on how different types of students are affected by sort of these new methods that we're implementing. So I think it's really important to look into, is a flipped classroom environment really successful for all students, and how does it affect students differently? So the method and what they did to kind of get their research is, again, they went to Taiwanese high school seniors, and these were all students who were going to be majoring in some sort of math or physics field. And what they did was they kind of had them put into a flipped classroom course that was sort of review of math material that they would have learned throughout their high school career to kind of get them prepped for their college courses. They had a little under 300 students, 273 students, 151 of which were female and 122 were male. And after they took the course, the students had to complete a survey where they kind of gave a couple different responses about the course that kind of were to gauge their feelings and their perceptions about what was going on. They then also were given a kind of post test to sort of see their performance and what their learning outcomes were for the course. The results was that first, there was no significant difference in performance between females and males in the course. So when they looked at the learning outcomes, they were across the board, if you just looked at females and males, were pretty similar. What they did notice was that for males and females, different things correlated with their higher performance than other things. For males, they were performing better in the courses when they perceived that there was value in the course, when they basically felt that this course is actually helping me, it's doing something for me, I appreciate the fact that it's in a flipped classroom environment. They needed to see the value in what they were doing, and the students who said they saw the value in what they were doing performed better. And that wasn't necessarily the case with the females. With the females, the thing that most correlated with their high performance was whether they felt that the lesson structure was good. So basically, they felt that everything was organized well, if the flipped classroom was run correctly, and those sorts of things. So the actual structure of the lesson, if they felt that did well, that correlated more with higher learning outcomes for females. So the researchers went ahead and kind of gave some of their discussion points and analysis on what these results meant. And one of the first things they said was that the males, they actually felt that the value piece, they meant that they didn't really need to change anything about a flipped classroom for males. Now, their discussion was very specific for math, because this was a math course, and so they wanted to keep their discussion specifically on that idea. And their feelings were that men are generally good at math, so that they'll find value in the course just because it's math. So they don't need to do anything special to sort of reach males and have them see more value in what's going on. For females, they felt that because they felt that the organization was something that was important and that the structure was really important, that they needed to make sure that if doing a flipped classroom for math in the future, that there's very clear organization and very clear sort of structure to what's going on. Very similar to if you think about different sort of lesson structures where you say, hey, here's what we're going to be doing, here's an agenda ahead of time, here's some structure about what's going on, just some of those sort of clear organizational things they felt would be needed. And to them, they said that females were not as good at math, and therefore they needed that organization to help scaffold what was going on and help females succeed. So I had a few issues with some of the conclusions they came to, as you might expect. Number one is just that some of the research methods were definitely not great in terms of making a conclusion that's more broad. They obviously were Taiwanese researchers, and they did their research in Taiwan. And, while that is great for high school Taiwanese students, it's not a great sample to kind of extrapolate across, the entire world, or even just for us in the United States to kind of look at that information. Especially because these were all highly motivated students who were going to college for a math field. So trying to say that this applied to all flipped classrooms, especially even just flipped classrooms for math and flipped lessons for math, is really kind of missing the boat here, because the sample does not really provide enough information for that. In addition, there were some things in the method that I thought could have been cleaned up a little bit. Anytime there's a survey, it's kind of not always getting you the best sort of research, and so there were just a few things I think were missing in there that would have made this research more applicable for myself as a United States teacher. One thing that I did also have an issue with was some of the conversation about the males and females. It seemed that the researchers had some gender biases going into this research, and it kind of colored their discussion. The females being bad at math is a misconception. I actually, when I read this, I went online and kind of looked for some research out there to say, are females actually worse at math? And it's a huge misconception. There is definitely a noticeable shortage of females in higher math fields, but it has nothing to do with female performance in math. It has more to do with some social structures that have been set up that kind of make it so that females aren't as attracted to this sort of fields. So the idea that females are bad at math and therefore need more structure to do well is not really a great conclusion, and really kind of not helpful for furthering discussion and kind of getting some of the good things that came out of this research. And there were some things that I think are applicable and some things that really could be used. The idea that males need to perceive value in the course in order to perform well is actually not a bad thing to know and be able to apply into your math flipped classroom experience. To me, that means that in a flipped classroom setting, you need to have real world examples. You need to show what you're doing, where it's actually where it's actually used in the real world. Maybe bring in an expert and say, hey, here's where I'm using this particular thing, or here's where this is headed. And then even just connecting with your students and seeing what things they're interested in, and how you can apply what you're doing with them. I know in math you can apply a lot of things to video games and things that students are really interested in. And those are all really good things to get out of this research and to see, because those are things that really kind of apply to having a good lesson structure and having things that really work for students. This is good teaching. And additionally, for the females, them needing organization, in that case, a learning management system such as Schoology or Google Classroom, some things that some of you have used, those are really awesome for organizing a classroom for students, and really can help all students. But if females really do particularly need more organization, that's something that you can provide for them that might even benefit other male students in your class. In addition, for lesson organization, there's a lot of different apps and things out there that you can use to help students kind of have everything in one place. Like, this is where I go to get my home portion. Here it tells me what my agenda is, what I'm doing, what I'm expected to know when I go through this, and provide some structure. I use Nearpod. I talk about Nearpod a lot as something that I think would be really successful for a flipped classroom. I know there's other things out there, such as ClassKick is one that some people use, that kind of has a virtual whiteboard portion. And there's just some other things you can use to really organize what you're doing and have students kind of get into your lesson and have it be structured and organized for them. So some connections that I had from this research to what we kind of learned throughout this course. I think that really the whole goal here is, how do I reach all my students? How do I get all students, gender, no matter what their gender, male, female, whatever, how do I get them to really know what's going on, understand what's going on? And that really applies to social dependency. It's really one of the only ways to reach all students. Have them work together, have them collaborate, have them connect, have them do things that they can provide some of that structure and scaffolding to help you out to reach them all. And really just getting to know your students. I have on here parental involvement. We had a whole big chapter on parental involvement, and they can really give you insights on their students and what makes something valuable to them. Males, it said in this research, need value to perform well in the course. And, that might be different for every student, and the parents might be able to tell you what works for their kid and what doesn't. What makes it a girl in your class feel that the structure of the class is working for them to do well. And then last but not least, in terms of the INACOL standards, standard A is really the big thing that kind of applies to this research, where it says a shift from teacher-led instruction to student-centered learning to meet the individual needs and foster engagement and motivation. That's really what it's all about. How can I meet the needs of all my students, male, female, whatever? No matter what your students are going through or who they are or what they're doing, you want to meet their needs. And that's really what this research was trying to look at is, hey, here's one sort of differentiating factor for students, whether they're male or female. What are some differences that we can connect from them, and what are some things we can do? And I think that that's extremely important in an online setting where it can be harder to get to know your students, as we've seen throughout this year. Hopefully you guys have some questions for me about the research and some things that I can kind of clear up for you in the comments. But thank you for watching, and I appreciate it.